Hello, I am Natalie Hummel, and welcome to another issue of Every Kid's Youth Sports Stories. Today I have Brian Bogert. Sorry, butchered your name, but I apologize. But why don't you give just a quick introduction?
Yeah, so I'm excited to be here with you today. We've recently connected, and I've got some pretty unique approaches to what I've done with my youth sports. And today, I'm a human behavior and performance coach and speaker, and I work with a lot of individuals just to get to their next level of performance, become more aware, more intentional, and more of who they already are. Um, Real quick, though, part of what has contributed to my story and some of my core philosophies outside of the business work that I've done in this world is when I was a young kid, I was run over by a truck and my left arm was completely severed from my body. And so that happened when I was 7 years old. And so when we get into the sports in a second, you'll definitely understand why and how that was a little different for me. But I consider myself an athlete. I love to be active. And a whole lot of the things that I do today are still really connected to movement in general. So
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, that's quite the story and quite the injury. So tell me, what was your youth sports story? Like what sports did you play growing up? And
yeah.
just love to hear.
So I was always active, but one of the first things I remember doing is I remember it, but I also was told the story. I think I was 2.5. I wasn't even 3 years old yet. We were
Wow.
camping and I went up to my dad and said, I want you to take the training wheels off my bike. And he said, all right, you might fall. And I said, yep. And then I'll get back up. And I literally remember doing this. I was not even 3 years old. It was on one of those 12-inch bikes, like with the tiny wheels. And he took off the training wheels and I got on my bike and rode. And so I was always on my bike. I was always moving and active. The reason I shared that story is because when I had my accident, I had to stop playing sports for a while, doing many of the things that I played that were very, very physical. And I had to relearn how to ride a bike. And
Hmm.
so it took me the better part of a few months to relearn how to ride my bike with a clear imbalance in the way that I'm structured today. But one of the reasons I shared that as well is one of the things I've always loved is mountain biking and road biking. And I'm actually actively training for an Ironman as we speak. So bikes have played a really, really big role for me in all sports. But I played everything. I played basketball, I played football, and I was really blessed because had an opportunity at a pretty young age. I think I was 12 or 14 to start tennis, and I picked up tennis very, very quickly. I don't have a tricep in the left side of in my left arm, and so tossing the ball up was like one of the biggest hurdles. But I had a
Mm.
coach that just was absolutely adamant and determined to really be able to help me figure out how to do that, so that I didn't have to toss the ball up and hit it with the same hand, which is how I started. And so that translated pretty quickly. I actually was able to become a tennis pro when I was, I think, 15. Played, and then
Wow.
I ended up teaching for a few years. But I've always done everything. Snowboarding and rollerblading and it's skateboarding. It's to me it's anything that I could do to move and do something, whether it was an individual sport or a group sport, golf, you name it, I've done it. And I love it because to me it's all about really pushing myself.
Yeah. Well, I love that as a story because, I think the just the spirit of overcoming and the accessibility, like sports is accessible to everybody. And some people that I've talked to say, "Oh, well, I never did sports because I wasn't this or I wasn't that." And I love the story that youth sports is really available to everyone, and it really is an internal thing about whether you define yourself as that. And so I love that story of overcoming and just going for it no matter what. So I love that. I love
Thank
that you
you.
shared
Thank
that.
you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never wanted to be confined. I never wanted people to tell me what I could or couldn't do. And I was always motivated to do it. So I figured out a way, whether it was water skiing and learning how to get out of the water with one arm or whatever. I mean, to
Right.
me, it was like if there's enough motivation, if there's enough purpose, it overtakes the pain and we can really find a way to make anything happen. So I appreciate you saying that.
Yeah, I love it. So one of the things that we're really trying to highlight in these conversations is the value of playing youth sports, and it comes in a lot of ways. Like a lot of people go automatically to team sports, and oh, I learned this. But even in individual sports, and like tennis is kind of one of those hybrids. It's kind of an individual sport, but you're usually part of a team. And
Yeah.
but like, what are some of the things that you think that you learned playing youth sports that translates into your career and life today?
Yeah, so I think relationships is a big one. And whether that's playing tag football in the street in front of our house, or riding bikes with a bunch of friends in dirt fields near where we grew up, or these individual sports. I think relationships are a really big piece because pretty much every sport, whether it's individual or team, there's other people involved, right? Even golf,
Yes.
you're typically on a round with other people.
Yeah.
And so to me, it was a really delicate balance of competitiveness with myself, but competitiveness with other people. And
Hmm.
those people that know me, I always joke that I'm not competitive at all, and they laugh because pretty much anytime there's competition, I figure out a way to like ratchet it up a level.
Yes.
Um, and being with people that are better than you also is an opportunity to grow and develop in life. And so I learned that in sports early, is that when I would play with people who were better than me, my skill sets would constantly develop. And that's
Yeah.
translated 100% into my professional life, because if I'm one of the smartest, most capable, most successful people in the room, I'm in the wrong room,
Yeah.
right? I'm in a position where I don't have somewhere to go. And so I spent 15 years in risk management and employee benefits consulting. And one of the biggest reasons I left my first company is because 5 years in, at a very young age in my early 20s, I was one of the top producers.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm one of the top producers in my early 20s, where am I going to grow to? And
Yeah.
I joined a firm as a partner where I ended up literally playing with like the superstars, the all-star team, some of the best in the world and in the country. And there was no way, even if I dedicated 20 years of my life, that I was going to be the top in that group of people, because there was
Yeah.
just so much talent. And so I think that's one of the big things that I learned from sports. And then I also learned how to push the limit, both physically and mentally, with what we can do.
Yeah.
And also the idea that sometimes we need coaches and mentors in our lives that see blind spots that we don't see ourselves. So when
Mhm.
we pause and calibrate, they can make one tiny little shift. And all of a sudden, we find ourselves being able to move faster with less effort, right? Or do
Yeah.
something easier because all of a sudden there's just a slight tweak to technique. And so, there's infinite ways to improve in sports, no matter what it is, team or individual. And so, again, all of those things have translated into my life, and they
Yeah.
translate very heavily into the performance and human behavior work that I do today with the individuals that I coach, whether they're corporate athletes or athletes on the field. A lot of the concepts are the same, and they all relate to everybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh man, I love that because that's one of the things that I always go back to as well in sports. Is just that, especially when you've played at a high level and had like one of those really great coaches that just like you said, just one little small tweak, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, like I remember increasing my vertical jump in college, and it was just like a little technique, and it was like, oh my gosh, it opened up an
That's
extra
right.
3 inches of vertical, and it's just like that is it was just a game changer. And I love those little things. And you're right, those things exist in every career, every job. It's those little things that just remove friction and can help you increase your
Yeah.
performance to the next level. So I really,
Well, and I mean, honestly, it's one of the reasons I have multiple coaches in my life today. I
yeah.
mean, I have a swim coach that I'm working with as I'm training for this Ironman, and I just 2 weeks ago was in the pool, and again, I've been swimming and swimming and swimming and doing the work, and all of a sudden, it's like I spent 30 minutes with him, and in that 30-minute window, he made two minor tweaks, and it was insane the impact that it had. Right? So I've
Yeah.
had business coaches in my lives, I've had meditation coaches in my lives. The reality of it is, a lot of that stuff came from the understanding of how effective coaching can be from sports.
Yeah. That's great. That's awesome. So one of the reasons I'm doing these conversations is to get some of this really great, like learning lessons from playing sports. But one of the things going on today is 38% of kids are playing sports today. Only 38%. And when you look at low income kids, it's only 22% of low income kids get the
Hmm.
opportunity to play. And if they are playing, usually it's only one season, and it's usually a shortened season.
Yep.
And sometimes they're only playing like 1 or 2 days that they get, some free program that comes through their community, and they're considered part of that 22%. And so we're really on a mission to try and change that and get more kids playing sports, and really to build the awareness of how important participating in youth sports is, especially for those underserved, uh,
Hmm.
kids, low income kids that just can't afford. I mean, unfortunately, our youth sports model has gone to this super competitive model that parents are paying maybe $5,000 to $30,000 a year for their kids to participate. And we're really trying to get the focus back on recreational sports, on those everyday youth sports programs where kids can go from one sport in the fall, do another sport in the winter, do another sport in the spring, and just really helping them. So I would just love to hear from you, like, what you think when you hear that number 38%, and what we're trying to do is raise enough money to get every kid the chance to play. And I just love to hear what you think about that.
Yeah, so I think it's interesting because I think perspective is important. So when we talk about 38% today, I don't know what it was 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and how does that compare, right? So to me, I think trends are real. That said, as a real-time singular data point, right, 38% to me sounds low. I mean, I know that for us, and it might have just been the friends that we had and the people that we ran with. I mean, we lived outside.
Yeah.
Like our parents, it wasn't difficult for them to get us outside. In fact, they had to put like limits on how much time we spent outside,
Yeah,
so we'd
I
come
know.
inside and do the things that we needed to do. And so,
Yeah.
I don't know if that was a generational thing or which I'm sure it is because technology wasn't the same when I was a kid. Um, but I also think that there's a cultural shift, and we're seeing differences just in activity, even within adults, and how are people actually being outside. So to
Hmm.
me, it's a sad number, but that also is exciting because I don't ever look at something that's sad without recognizing the opportunity. It means there's opportunity for growth. It means
Yeah.
there's opportunity for change, and hopefully, despite some of the economic impact that we've experienced through this pandemic, one thing that has been very exciting for me, I see more people outside. I see more adults walking in the morning, running, getting on their bikes in the morning.
Yeah.
I see more people, families, dads and kids and moms and kids and whole entire families walking, doing family bike rides than I've seen in pretty much the last 5 to 10 years. I've seen more in the last 6 months with people doing that. There's a
Yeah.
huge back order on a lot of sporting equipment, bikes in particular, for that
Yes.
exact reason. So I think that it is sad. And I also think that that underprivileged category of the 22% that you talk about, I think that's a group that often desires to get out more, but they don't have the resources. And so, a big part of your mission, I personally identify with because I think we can give lots of people opportunity to get active and move and have outlets to do that. I also tend to agree with what you said. I'm seeing a lot bigger difference between when I was a kid versus today with the organized sports and where people are choosing to spend their money and their resources, right? Club
Yeah.
sports, I say this with no criticism because I think that there's a lot of phenomenal opportunities out there for these kids and families that can't afford it. But at the same time, I think it also limits, I think, some of the multi-sport athletes and the diversity of experience between individual and group sports. And the reality of it is what we know, a very small percentage of these kids are ever going to go pro with it. And even amongst kids who can get scholarships, amongst D1, D2, and D3, as a percentage of kids that actually play in these sports, it's still very small. And
Yeah.
so, we have to really probably as a society take a relook at what is the value of that investment that we're making in these club sports. When you talk about people are spending $5,000 to $30,000 a year for their kid to be in one sport, when it
Yeah.
won't maybe pay for their college and may or may not ever be a professional opportunity for them, like where are those dollars being invested and what's the ROI on that investment for the long term with this kid?
Yes.
I think those are things we as a society have to contemplate. And I don't think that we can do that quickly or easily. And so that's one of the reasons why when you and I first connected and you told me about what you guys are working on, I think it's phenomenal. If we can get more people moving, take some of the friction out of getting people access to sports and movement in general. I think it's a win for everybody. And we as a society will probably be healthier as a result of it. I don't just mean that physically, I mean that
Yes.
emotionally, spiritually, right? All of the above, because movement is key.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Uh, it's interesting with the whole club sports thing, parents, um, I work with a lot of parents, and they're that have their kids in those programs, and they say, yeah, but he's learning so many skills, and he's getting better and better, and compared to his peers that aren't doing it. And there's a lot of research that shows if you take 9, 10-year-old boy and put him into a, let's say, soccer program, and he's playing competitive soccer, compared to another kid who's not playing that, yes, that kid is going to become a better soccer player. But if this child is playing soccer and lacrosse and flag football and baseball and moving through, by the time he's 17, 18 years old, this kid actually is going to be a better athlete
I
because
believe
he's
that.
built
Yep.
the overall
A
toolbox.
well
And
a well-rounded athlete. I
yeah,
totally agree.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things that I look at too, just in general. I mean, athletes, like general athletes, because they can pick up and play in any sport,
Yeah.
right? And then when there's like specialists and they can go really deep there, but maybe it doesn't translate. And
Yeah.
so I kind of look at that as every opportunity for our kids as a society is how do we get them as much functional use in as many ways as possible? Sports is one category, but
Yes.
giving them creating well-rounded people is going to serve our society better, right? To give them the opportunity to then lean into what they're interested in. Because once they're well rounded and they attach to something, they're going to go deep with that on their own accord, their own passion, their own drive, their own money, their own resources. And guess
Right.
what? That's what creates brilliance.
Yes. Yeah, good, great point. And that's kind of what we believe is that competitive sports model is really appropriate at like age 15, 16, 17. Because at that time they're self-selecting. They're saying, I really love this and
Yeah.
I want to invest in this. When they're 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, it's typically the parents' wish
Mhm.
that they play that. And a lot of times the kids don't have the courage to stand up to their parents and say, I don't want to do that. They just
Yeah.
go along with what their parents say, and not that it's bad or wrong. It's just I don't think it's best serving our kids, and getting the result that we all think that we're getting from doing
Yeah.
that. And so,
Well, and like I said too, I mean, just look statistically at certain things. Like we know how unlikely it is that they're going to have a career in sports,
mhm,
right? Whether they're playing or even just in a intangible career or a fringe career in sports. I wish I could remember the name of the book, but there was an analysis that they did where they looked at hockey and
yeah,
how like 90% of professional hockey players have birthdays between January and March. And they were wondering, why is that the case? And what they really found is that because of the cutoff for ages getting into hockey, particularly in Canada, but it's followed in the United States as well, that that those are the kids that get in with the cutoff that are the oldest and biggest kids for that year. And
yeah,
so anybody in the other 9 months doesn't mean that they don't have a shot, but statistically, they are less capable because you could have somebody who's born in December of 2020 and somebody who's born in January of 2020, and they're both competing in the same league. Well, there's an 11-month difference between those kids. And
yeah,
so what happens is those leagues continue to isolate and isolate and isolate. The bigger, faster, stronger kids continue to get moved up to the advanced leagues. Well, guess what? 90% of the NHL, roughly, and that number might be off, right? Because this is
yeah, yeah,
going
yeah,
from memory, but it's an astounding statistic, are born in the first 3 months of the year.
yeah,
That has nothing to do with the kid's talent. That has nothing to do with investment. That has 100% do with timing,
yeah,
right? Which is crazy to look at. It's hard to believe like we just can't influence the outcome always.
yeah, yeah. It's really interesting. Well, I want to, just thank you so much for coming on, sharing your point of view, sharing your story with us. It helps us further our cause, and really the whole point of this is just to open up the conversation about the power of youth sports and what it could do to help kids develop. And it's not the answer; it's just one answer
Yeah.
of something that can help kids. So I really appreciate your time.
I think it's powerful. Thank you for doing what you're doing. Thanks for the opportunity to come join you today and, keep this positive message going out there because again, we get more people moving, it's better for all of us.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much.